Because what you, the unsung heroes in the wastewater industry do, matters. Join me, Suzan Chin-Taylor, the Doo-Doo Diva, a longtime veteran of the wastewater, trenchless, and civil infrastructure industry each week as I deliver industry know-how from industry pros who know how. Whether you want to learn about the latest trends in technology, training and retaining great talent, sales and marketing, leadership and growth, or simply how to be more efficient, productive, or profitable, this podcast is for you. Let's dive in. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the Doo-Doo Divas Smells Like Money podcast. Today, we're continuing our series on safety, and we have brought back one of the master trainers and instructors from Workplace Safety Specialists, the company that Stu Campanin was associated with, for those of you who tuned into our prior episodes. And the reason we wanted to bring Tom Herber in here today was to talk about a little known subject, or at least it was little known to me. We're all familiar with confined space and the importance of confined space training and what that means for our industry. But there was something that Stu had mentioned about confined space emergency response. And I was like, huh? What's that? And so when he explained it to me, I thought, oh, I've got to have this come on the show and talk about this subject. And so because this is way above my pay grade, I'm going to let Tom, our illustrious trainer here, and from what I understand, an expert in this particular subject, explain what this is, why you need it, the things that you need to think about, and what it all entails. And so with that, welcome to the show, Tom.
It's a pleasure being here. Thank you.
So explain to our audience who may not be familiar with the terminology of confined space emergency response and what that entails and what that means.
Well, all employers are required by OSHA to either have trained emergency responders that can respond within, quote unquote, a reasonable amount of time. And that's usually determined between like the municipality and local fire department, or an in-house rescue team that's properly trained in case of emergencies, or contracted rescuers who have the proper training and proper equipment. So anytime a permit required space is entered, the employer has to provide one of those three options for the personnel that are entering the space, just in case something goes sideways and a rescue is needed.
So when you're saying about in-house personnel, I imagine that if you're doing a lot of work, I guess the question was, we were talking about this offline, the question comes up, well, doesn't the fire department provide that?
A lot of people just assume their local fire department has those capabilities. But as I've learned, and I've been able to show throughout some of the trainings I've done with various municipalities and utility companies, that is not always the case. They just assumed that they never reached out to the actual fire department and said, hey, do you have these capabilities, because we're doing such and such entry into a permit required space. And come to find out, the departments aren't capable. The closest rescue capabilities in some instances is over an hour away, which is not a reasonable response time.
Right, especially in like a manhole or a live sewer with H2S, the response time would need to be minutes.
Right. There was one instance I was doing some trainings for a utility company, and they assumed the local fire department had those capabilities. And I said, you know what, let's find out. I pulled my phone out, put it on speaker, called the business line. Very nice lady answered the phone. I explained who I was, why I was calling. She transferred me to a captain. He answered the phone, and same thing, explained to him. He was very, very cordial. Was willing to help me out. I said, so we're just trying to ask, what's your capabilities? He said, we have a guy. And that when he's in town and not on vacation, he would be the one to respond. And which immediately was shocking to everybody in the room. I said, so if there was an emergency, what is your operational plan? Oh, we pull from this town and this town and this town and that town, and hopefully within about an hour, we can get enough personnel to respond to the incident. I said, well, then if that's not the case, what's plan B? Oh, we call this city, which is over an hour away, and they respond. Which the look of surprise and shock on all the people in the room's face. One of them was a supervisor. And I said, not to, make you all look bad, but this is an assumption that could cost somebody their life. So you have to go through the steps. You have to reach out and see what the capabilities are. And then if they don't have it, start going with plan B.
Or C. And
or
so
C, or
or
however
D.
far
So
you have to go down the line,
right. So you and I had discussed there's different ways that, a contractor or a utility can approach this. They can, have their own personnel that go through some rigorous training on how to do this and make sure that you've got multiple people. Like in that case, we have a guy. You can't just have a guy. He could get sick one day when something happens.
Yeah.
Or if you're lucky enough, if you're in a larger metropolitan area, your fire department, at very first, this is what it told me, is if you're going to be on a job site, you should probably first and foremost, before beginning, contact the local fire department to see, do we have these capabilities? And if not, like you were saying, go to plan B. So you either have to have your own personnel, or you would need to contract that out. So I'd like to take that in stages, in that if you decide, okay, well, we do enough of this, does it make sense? Are we large enough? When does it make sense for you to have your own staff trained to do this? What is the training required? Talking about sharing knowledge here. And what is the equipment investment required in order for you to be prepared for the scenarios for rescue that you might encounter if you want to have your own in-house staff first, and then the consideration of having this done by a third party, and how does that work?
To have your own in-house team, it's a very large investment, not only in time to make sure your people are properly trained, but then in equipment, if you don't already have the equipment, it's a very large investment that you have to justify. And what I always tell people is identify your spaces first, your permit required spaces. What types of entries are they? Are they 100% vertical entries, or do we have some horizontal entries, which then makes extra equipment required on top of everything? Then you have to have the people who are willing to do it. All right, and they have to be committed to being that person. An entry rescue is the last thing we want to do. We want self-rescue first, or a non-entry rescue first. To do an entry rescue is to put people into a space that's already incapacitated another or a couple individuals. So it's very hazardous and very high risk. So that's the last thing we want to do. So a lot of training involves recognition of what the issue may be. Is it an issue with the space, the atmosphere, or is it a medical issue that has nothing to do with the space? It maybe has to do with the individual. So there's a lot of that training involved. And then it's practice to become proficient at every single aspect of rescue work. And with that practice, hopefully you develop the ability to not panic and just start rushing in, and because that's when we compound the situation.
Because it's your buddy down there.
Right. And 60% of all confined space deaths are from would-be rescuers. So well over half of confined space fatalities are would-be rescuers. And it's a very overpowering emotional response. As you said, that's your buddy, that's your coworker. I need to go in there to assist him to get him out, to save them. And because it's an overwhelming emotional response, it basically blocks all capacity to step back and take a look at everything and then figure out a plan to safely do it. Your emotion just takes control over everything, and you just start rushing and rushing in. And the next thing you know, instead of one person, we have 3 people now we have to get out of the space, which now you need 3 times as many resources than you normally did, which if it takes a lengthy amount of time to get resources to get one person out, imagine now you're trying to get 3 people out of a space. And it's just, but yeah, teaching that ability to step back and take a breath and let's figure out what's going on before rushing in is one of the biggest challenges in any type of rescue training.
Right. And just staying on top of your game. I'm a huge fan of Chicago Fire. And so, when I know they're all staged, and I know it's Hollywood and whatnot, but like some of those rescues with cars and smashed, it's amazing the physics that they show on that they have to think clearly on their feet.
Yeah.
Of, okay, how do I extract this person carefully without myself being put in danger? And they show them that they're running drills all the time. And so when you were saying that, having that commitment of that staff being willing to do those drills to stay on top of it, there's an investment of time.
Yeah. There's one municipality I work with. They have their own in-house team. It's a wastewater plant that sits outside of a city, far away from their department is about a 20-minute response, and their department isn't confined space trained. So that's why they have the in-house team. And I go up there once a year, and they tell me every time, once a year isn't enough. We want you up here more than that. But cost-wise, the municipality is just not willing to do it. So the folks on the team recognize that they need more and they want more. It's just right now it's not fiscally possible to have me constantly come up here. So this last time I was up, I coordinated with them and created some drills for them to do.
Oh, wow.
That they could do on their own. And if they had any questions for me, here's my email, here's my phone number, get in touch with me. If you had a question or if you ran it and you ran into some problems, I can talk you through it, something like that. At least then they would get something,
Right.
more than what they're getting.
And so then the next option, if fire department can't do it, it's cost prohibitive, personnel prohibitive, then you have to look at contracting out.
Right.
And so that is something that your company offers, but there's companies around the country that do this.
Yes.
And what is the official title of that type of service?
It's Confined Space Rescue Standby.
Okay. And so
all we're doing is standing by. I've done it a few times. And basically I go with my equipment and I get harnessed up. I have everything set up, and then I basically just stand there and wait, hoping that nothing goes wrong and I'm not needed. But I'm there just in case.
And so a rescue service such as yourself, you've got all the equipment. Depending on the project, you might bring additional personnel to help you.
Mm-hmm.
And typically, how long do you stay on? Well, I guess it depends on the duration of the job or ever long that they need you to stand by.
Right. I'm usually there an hour or two before they actually begin work. 1, to set up my equipment. 2, I go over what the job entails for the day. So I have an understanding of what they're doing in the space, and that way I can start thinking ahead of what possibly may go wrong and be ready for that. Obviously, you're not going to be able to account for all possibilities, but I can start thinking in my head, getting aware. I review my equipment with some of their staff. So if I do have to make entry, there's confidence that they can assist from the outside if I need them to. I work closely with the attendant who guards the entrance to the space, and we work together monitoring the air and making sure communications stay with the entrance, so we can verify that everything's going okay. And then I'm there the entire length of their job, and then about an hour or so afterwards, taking down and making sure everybody's okay. I do kind of a cursory, like, medical, like, you guys are all right, you know, any ill effects, are you dizzy, anything like that, just to make sure they're okay.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So it seems like for those who can't, that this is the ideal scenario to keep their workers safe.
Right.
Does it, even in the case of, I was going to ask, even in the case of, let's say you've got you're in a major metropolitan area working, and you have a local fire department that has that training and doing it, does it make sense for companies to have some, I would say, basic training for their staff to prevent, as you said earlier, that panic? To be able for them to do what they can without putting themselves in harm's way until the fire department arrives.
Yeah, part of the training that we provide in our 8-hour confined space class is some rescue work. We go over the basic principles of rescue, strongly emphasizing self-rescue or non-entry. And then once the classroom part is done, we will go actually out to a space and maybe put somebody in the space, and then without telling anybody else, I might whisper to the entrant going in, hey, plug up your meter and make the alarm go off. I want to see how everybody reacts. So then there's like, what's going on? You know, so I kind of throw some curveballs at them, you know, just to see their reaction and see what they do. And, you know, as much as good intended as they are, overwhelming percentage of them immediately go from zero to full panic. And I have to stop them and say, you know, stop. What's going on? Well, his alarm's going off. Or her alarm's going off. We got to go. Okay. Hang on a second. Do you still have communications? What's their physical status? Can you communicate with them? Because I've had more than one of them say, get them out, and they want to start cranking. Well, is it a self-rescue? Communicate with the entrant. Is there an issue? Because if their meter is going off, but the one outside is going off, is it a meter issue, or is it an issue with the space? Go through the steps, but they can't learn to not go from zero to panic until they've been put in those scenarios and then start training themselves. So that's why it's all, hold on, everybody take a breath. Let's work through the problem and not guess and make it worse. And then you can see them start, okay, and they go through the steps, but the initial like, oh my God, always pops up. But it just comes with time and practice and patience, you know, and so try to do it as much as I can.
That's a great idea. Did you almost like mock trials?
Yeah, without anybody noticing. Yeah.
And it's not real, but they don't know that.
Exactly.
And it's a great idea. That's a great idea. You know, it kind of goes along with the drills. Is that, you know, fake, like somebody doesn't know and one person does know, and to basically set up almost a real world. Let's see what happens.
I've seen marked improvement in some of the municipalities that I've gone back to, where now there's a couple of people when this happens, they'll start yelling, everybody relax, let's find out what the issue is. And I just stand back and smile, because I'm like, yeah, they're getting it. You know, and I always love seeing people improve and, you know, come outside their comfort zone and expand. And it's very, very enjoyable to me to see people do well.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, Tom, for those who might be interested in learning more about, you know, the standby service, or even I like the way you're approaching confined space training with, you know, really honing in on the rescue. How can they learn more about your services?
I would say just contact Workplace Safety and talk to Stu or Jim Shaw is one of our new people. He's taking over scheduling and clients and stuff like that. So that's usually where it comes through. If somebody approaches them with a request like that, then they'll reach out to me, and then we exchange emails back and forth about, what date works. They have a job plan for this day. Are you available? And then after a couple of emails, we get it nailed down.
Right. And then, of course, I know that they offer lots of, training, as Stu alluded to, lots of different things to prevent injury, as well as the confined space training. But this, just talking about this standby service and what can go wrong out in the field that you're not planning for. I loved when you said you love it when it's a day where you're just standing around doing nothing.
Yeah. Well, like I said, it could be a medical issue, maybe heart related, breathing related, diabetic related. It could be a slip and trip and fall. It might have nothing to do with the atmosphere of the space. So there's a preparation for that. Recognizing signs and symptoms of a medical emergency as opposed to an atmospheric condition, things like that. So it's a lot of time and a lot of effort, and in some instances, it's a lot of repetitive work, but the repetition is needed to become proficient and being able to, because a lot of times you have to make 3 or 4 decisions in almost a half a heartbeat, and it's got to be like that fast. You have to be able to analyze, come up with a plan, and start implementing the plan like that. But that only comes with time and experience and practice.
Right.
So.
Right. Well, thank you for sharing your knowledge and your, insights into this, Tom. I really appreciate it, because, these guys out there in the field, they have my respect. I appreciate them so much, because they do not just dirty jobs, but a lot of people don't realize how dangerous the work can be, depending on what your role is in maintaining our wastewater and our water systems. And so, for that, we need to keep them safe.
Yeah.
Absolutely need to keep, everybody's got to come home at night,
Yeah. There's one thing I would like to add. There's one municipality I do a lot of work with, and I like their system, and I encourage others to try it, is whenever they have work scheduled in a permit required confined space, they have a system set up with their fire department who has confined space capabilities, and they basically send an email to the chief in charge of special operations and the closest firehouse to that work, and the email says, we're doing confined space permit required confined space work. This is where we're going to be at. This is what time we're starting. This is what we're going to be doing. We'll notify you when we're done. So then the fire department already has a heads up that this work is going on. So if they do receive an alarm for this address, they can go, oh, that's a confined space. I remember the email. And they're already that far ahead in their thinking to be prepared for a possible rescue. And then when their work is done, they send another email. We have completed our work. Everything is shut down,
That is a great idea.
Yeah. I love it. When they told me that, I loved it. And ever since then, I've been including it in my classes. This is what you should do. This is what I think you should do. Talk to your fire department, set it up, invite your fire department out to do walkthroughs, to do space familiarization. These are our spaces. These are where we regularly work. And then they can get an idea and start pre-planning ahead of time. Well, if we come here, this is what we're going to need to do. Knowledge is the big thing. Communication and knowledge can eliminate a lot of issues.
Right. But I love that, because then it's also establishing a really nice relationship with those people that you're going to need. They can come prepared. And the preparation, anybody will tell you in some rehab jobs, what's the secret to a successful project? Prep.
Right.
And it's almost the same here, is that if you are prepared, what the Boy Scout motto, be prepared.
I loved it when somebody would call up and said, hey, you want to come do a walkthrough of our place? We'll be right there. We're on our way. I loved it. Anything we can do to gain knowledge of a place that we might have to respond to allows us to be safer in our response and more efficient, which then benefits the potential victims that we might encounter.
That is a fabulous idea. Thank you for remembering to share that.
My pleasure.
Really fantastic idea.
Yeah.
Well,
My
thank you, audience, for tuning in, and hope you got a lot out of this episode. I certainly had my eyes open to a lot of things that kind of knew about, but Tom really did a nice deep dive into some things that we really should be considering and pondering in our industry. And so thank you again for tuning in. And until next time, keep it flowing.
Be sure to subscribe to the show so you'll never miss an episode. If you're an industry expert and would like to be considered as a guest on the show, click the Be a Podcast guest link below in the show notes for more information. Thanks again for joining me, the Doo Doo Diva, on this week's episode of the Smells Like Money podcast.